We will go ahead and wait another minute for more people to sign in, because we know there are a lot of people who've registered, but we will be getting going very soon. Why don't we get started? Good afternoon, everybody, on this beautiful Wednesday, quasi-beautiful. The sun is halfway shining here in Chicago. Thank you for joining us here at the Belonging Project. For those of you who don't know, the Belonging Project is a national collaborative spearheaded by Saifa Shah and led by me, in conjunction with consultant groups and national bar associations, law firms, and legal departments. And we have a single focus. Our focus is to provide resources and support to diverse lawyers and diverse law students who are impacted by the COVID pandemic. As it turns out, this pandemic has lasted longer than many of us thought, and in the midst, we've also had a racial awakening, as well as economic fallout. And so we continue to provide support and resources through this platform. Through the Belonging Project, we offer weekly webinars, but we also offer a virtual hub of resources of all types on a variety of topics, everything from professional development to personal development to wellness and health. We also offer a mentoring program, so if you are in need of a mentor, please feel free to sign up on the Belonging Project website. And if you would like to be a coach, you can also sign up. We also have a coaching program where we provide one-on-one coaching with coaches who have been trained or certified to work specifically with lawyers. In this program, you get 3 months of one-on-one coaching, and we provide that through the Belonging Project free of charge. So that's a little bit about the Belonging Project. And today's session, we're going to talk about this timeless question of, are we there yet? We continue to talk about the fact that we haven't achieved many of our diversity goals in the legal profession. And part of what frequently comes up, especially in inclusion and diversity spaces, is the fact that so much of the work that has to get done and the results that need to be seen are things that the diversity professional is expected to lead, but not necessarily functions that they control. So if you look at the standard job descriptions for diversity leaders, it will say everything in there, including responsibility for the advancement of diversity and improvement and inclusion, from recruiting, retaining, promoting, and advancing diverse talent. But in many of our organizations, these various functions don't fall under the Office or Department of Inclusion and Diversity. So today we have some experienced professionals here who each lead off various functions. I will start off by saying that at Saifa Shah, these are not the only people who help make sure that inclusion is part of the firm culture and that we are working towards our diversity goals. There are many other departments, but we decided to pick these groups because we work very closely with these groups more often than many others. Of course, accounting probably should be here, but I'm not sure anybody wants to hear about the finance stuff. So I'm going to quickly introduce each person just by name and their title, and I'd love for them to follow up after I've introduced everyone in telling you a little bit about their role in their department structure and makeup, and how they work their departments to embed inclusion and diversity into the business of what they do. So I am going to start in the order that people are on my screen. And so Allegra Nethery is our pro bono partner. Lucky for me, she's on my floor and like 4 offices down. So that's perfect. Molly Porter is I consider her my muse, my dream maker, all kinds of things. I love this woman. She's amazing. She's our Senior Director of Communications at Saifarth. Lindsay Callentine, funny, her birthday is on Juneteenth, which is really, really cool. I mean, because now we can never forget your birthday. Lindsay Callentine is based in New York, and she's our National Director of Legal Recruiting. And Kelly Wing, other than maybe Molly, Kelly is who I work probably the most with, because she is our Senior National Director of Talent Development, and she's based in Chicago, and she knows the good places to go eat when we need to have a working lunch. So everybody, This is part of my core team, my dream team, besides the people who are behind the camera that you don't see who make this happen every week. So Allegra, you want to go first with your 2 to 3 minute deeper introduction?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am the Pro Bono and Philanthropy Partner at Seyfarth, which means that I oversee basically all the different ways that we give back to our communities, whether that is through pro bono legal work, community service, charitable giving. I run our charitable foundation and our sustainability initiatives. And it is very important to me to work closely with inclusion and diversity, to find places where we can align our different initiatives. As Corey said, in normal times in our office, we sit right by each other, and it's a lot of fun to bounce ideas off of each other, and we'll get more into the pro bono and philanthropic initiatives and the crossover later in the program.
Thank you, Allegra. Molly?
Hi, I'm so glad to be here today among friends. It's been a while since I've seen this group because of COVID. I am the Senior National Director of Marketing at the firm. And, you know, I oversee a broad portfolio of programs related to the brand, marketing technology, brand story, communications. And I also oversee a team of people who are responsible for bringing the programs to life that you're going to hear about later in the call. You know, I was so thrilled when Corey joined the firm. I was actually on vacation her first day, but as soon as I got back, I made a beeline for her office. Because I knew that she was someone that I would be working with very closely, but I also knew that she was somebody who might at some point need a friend, and I wanted to be that friend for her. You know, I've worked with change a lot. I've worked with, especially in my role at Seyfarth, working with our innovators, and I know how fatiguing it can get. So I hope I've been that person for you, Corey, and I hope that the DEI professionals that are on the call have that person at their firms as well.
Thank you very much. I love that you said that. And we did not plan this, I promise you. But the DEI role can feel very isolating and lonely, especially when it's your job to say no, and it's your job to push against things, and it's your job to bring up the stuff that it's not how we've always done it. This is not how we do it. So thank you. And I appreciate that. Lindsay is also fairly new to Seyfarth, but she brings experience from other big laws. So she's going to have lots of ideas from lots of places. Lindsay, you next.
Hi, so I am Lindsay Callentine. I will be celebrating my 2-year anniversary at Seyfarth in about a month and a half, which blows my mind that we're going to be in December in a month and a half. This year has been insane. I've been in my house for 9 months, I feel like. But anyway, as Corey said, prior to that, I've worked in law firms my whole entire life. I spent 15 years at an AmLaw top 10 firm working in recruiting as well as various different components of HR. So I've been lucky enough in my career to sort of start in recruiting, and then I veered off into evaluations and compensation, employee relations to some degree, you know, managing some of the more generalized HR stuff, and then back into recruiting. And so it's given me a really good opportunity to have a pretty holistic look at how the whole entire attorney cycle works. And so, you know, I can come to recruiting and think of that in terms of a lot of the stuff that Kelly does on her team in talent development, which she's going to talk about. And, you know, recruiting is probably one of the first things that comes to mind when we think of collaboration with IND, but it's certainly, you know, it's not a cookie cutter approach, and each firm has different opportunities and different things to do. And I'm proud to say that Seyfarth is really sort of above and beyond what I've experienced in other places in my career. And I think we're excited to talk about some of those initiatives and some of the things that we do that make us a little bit different.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Kelly?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So for our team, our attorney talent team, you know, obviously law firms, really the backbone of an organization, and success is almost completely dependent on our talent. And so our team is really tasked with, from the second someone walks in the door, it's our responsibility to take those attorneys and our firm leadership and really help them navigate the firm, the performance management cycle, their professional development, and be a trusted advocate to help each person be successful. Given that, our attorney talent team, we really approach IND not necessarily as an effort or as an initiative, but really just part of our culture, and creating an environment where everyone can feel like they can come to the table and be at our firm as their authentic selves. And so we really see this, as we'll talk about later, in our mentorship and sponsorship programs, our way we approach evaluations, assessing our talent, some talent reviews we do quarterly with our leadership, our training and development needs. So everything we're doing, we really try to embed these ideas of, this is just part of how we operate. This shouldn't be an afterthought of, oh, do we have, are we thinking about, do we have enough diverse panelists? It's just natural because all of our individuals are talented, and we want to make sure we have, we're creating an environment that is inclusive and obviously has, direct correlation with what we're trying to achieve and for the firm and with our IND approach.
Thank you. So one of the things that almost everyone here is, I think, Allegra, you may be the only one who's not a lateral to the firm, right?
That is correct. I am homegrown. Summer associate in 94, associate in 95, partner 2000 something, pro bono partner 2017. So yeah, 25 years homegrown.
So one of the things, but even though you're homegrown, you've been lead in the pro bono law firm pro bono association, and you're very active in the community. But between Allegra and the four of us who've been other places, what we're always cognizant of is that there's more than one way to do something. And we know that you who are also on the line will have either questions on things that you're working on that you may want to ask us, how do we navigate that in our organization? Or you may have thoughts and ideas of how you do things differently. So what we want to do is to make this very collaborative. We would like you to use the question and answer format throughout this presentation to share some thoughts, whether it's something that we're talking about and in your organization, a different department owns that function, or you go about handling it a different way. We would love for you to share that information, and we'll try to read as much of it as we can, because what we don't want to do is give anybody the impression that we have the magic bullet and we've solved it all, because we ourselves are growing and we're constantly wanting to learn from others. I mean, even amongst the five of us here, we're always asking, can you reach out to your fellow talent people and find out how other people are doing this, or how they're handling that in recruiting, or how other folks are handling this pro bono issue. So question and answer, please feel free to use that as we go through this. So Lindsay, I'll start with you. In the inclusion and diversity space, oftentimes the conversation can get stuck on the recruiting. And thankfully, in more recent years, people are understanding it's not just bringing in the bodies, it's keeping them. So you bring them, and then Kelly's got to figure out how to keep them. But on the recruiting space, can you share some things that legal recruiting does to work in collaboration with inclusion and diversity to bring in diverse talent in a market, quite frankly, that's quite competitive?
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see sort of how the competition, it'll always remain a competitive market. It's never not been in my experience, but it's kind of interesting to see how that shifts nowadays with the change in things. But regardless of all the COVID fund and all that kind of stuff, recruiting and diversity have always worked really closely together in terms of identifying opportunities, sort of finding ways to stand out from the pack a little bit from other firms, especially with summer associate recruiting. There's a lot of noise and you don't have a lot of opportunity to get attention of law students. And so it's kind of what you pick and choose to put out there. And we're lucky that our diversity and inclusion and diversity story is a good one to tell. But, in short, I would say sort of some of the high level things, and this sounds like a no-brainer, and I would hope that every organization does it, but I think it bears to mention that basically, using diverse attorneys in interviews is, is hugely important. A, because the folks that you have that are diverse attorneys that are working for the firm, anyone who's involved in the recruiting process is typically much more engaged in the firm and sort of a big firm cheerleader, a positive person. Hopefully, if they're the opposite of that, they're not involved in the recruiting process. But having diverse attorneys involved in the recruiting process, A, keeps them engaged, which, when Kelly talks about retention, is certainly part of the battle, but B, also, gives opportunities for candidates to sort of see us walk the walk a little bit instead of just talk the talk. It allows them to talk to people who look like them, to understand the story of people who look like them, to frankly, despite the, diversity aspect of it in terms of gender or race, it gives them an opportunity to speak with folks that have different opinions on the firm and how things work. And so, having a diversity of interviewers on any schedule is obviously a huge thing. And it should go to say that that is for everybody who interviews, not just candidates of an underrepresented background. So hopefully most firms are doing that and thinking of that, but if not, it's sort of an easy way to reconsider your diversity stuff. One of the other things is I would touch on our summer program. We hire summer associates, but we call them summer fellows. And there's a number of reasons behind that, but I think one of the things that differentiates us, aside from the name, is that our summer fellows are hired directly into a department or a practice area, which, to some people can be a little daunting. You've just finished your first year of law school and you're already sort of choosing a path for the rest of your career, but we've had good experience in finding people that kind of know what they want to do and have a sense of where they want to go. And so hiring those people, we bring them in, and this helps, all summer associates, but particularly those of a diverse background where, you want to make sure that they have the right mentoring and the right opportunities at the very outset. They're in that practice group from the very beginning. We call them departments internally, but, they're in real estate, or they're in corporate, or they're in labor and employment. And they are getting training and assignments and mentorship specific to those groups and those departments. Everybody's getting training and mentorship on sort of generally being a good lawyer and all of that kind of stuff. But the difference with them coming in immediately to a certain department is that they then sort of get all the skills they need during their summer program to build up to join us as a first-year associate to really hit the ground running, as opposed to kind of trying out a bunch of different things. And sort of, I found that in my experience where there's a rotation program or somebody isn't, it's a free market system, folks can get a little bit lost. And oftentimes in my experience, that tends to be people of, that aren't, I knew from the time I was 3 years old, because my dad and my mom were both lawyers and they went to Harvard Law, that I was going to go to Harvard Law and I was going to be a litigator. That may work, that free market system may work well for folks like that who kind of have a sense, but for folks who really want to target a specific area and learn in that area, our approach is really kind of, it's special in that respect. So they come in, they're already sort of there. They have the baseline of being great practicing attorneys. Another thing that probably sounds like it would go without explaining, but I think, it's a good reminder, is making sure that your recruiting materials are focusing on your IND efforts. And if you have a good story to tell, tell it. And I say that that's a very broad thing, but one of the things you might want to think about is, for us, law students have there's a small bandwidth of their brain that they're going to devote to one firm, especially during the on-campus interview season where every firm looks the same, every firm's kind of doing the same thing, every firm's saying the same thing. So you really want to kind of pick and choose what you put out there as your tiny little soundbite that will get stuck in their head about your firm. And we're lucky at Cypher in that we have a really good story to tell in IND, and we can differentiate ourselves from other law firms in that respect. We aren't just sort of talking the talk and laying out sort of the general, here's what we do for diversity. I mean, we do a lot of unique stuff. And the other way to capitalize on that is to find programs. So for instance, the Belonging Project, which we're all here as a part of today, totally unique program, not necessarily something that I've ever seen in my career, certainly came about at the right time, obviously for that specific reason of the timing, but we took that and decided to make that an opportunity to target law students of a diverse background that may not have these opportunities all the time, may not have a summer associateship, may not have ever thought of Cypher or knew anything about us. And so we marketed pretty strongly all of the Belonging Project webinars, the mentorships, the engagement opportunities to law students that mostly came from law schools that have a higher population of diverse attorneys. And so instead of us going out to the top 25 law schools that everybody goes out to and tries to engage with and get those candidates interested in them prior to interviewing. We went out to a different group of law schools, and we got a great response from people who just engaged with the brand. And so hopefully what that translates into is they're interested in us and they want to come and work with us and they apply for our summer program. Or if they don't, they tell their friends about us, or they just tell their classmates about us. And so choosing the, very specific things to market to that group is a great idea with law students, because again, there's so few ways to differentiate yourself. And then without, taking over sort of the whole entire hour that we have here, one thing that has helped us a lot, specifically in lateral recruiting, although any type of recruiting, but the fact that we participate in the Mansfield rule. And so for those unfamiliar, essentially what it is there was the Rooney rule in football, I think, so not a sports person, but the idea being that football, right? Yeah. Yeah. They have like home runs and stuff. Yeah. But the idea being that, when they were interviewing for coaches and various other positions, 30%, I believe is the number for them, of that applicant pool had to be of a diverse background. And what that did was that opened them up to a much more diverse pool of candidates. So Diversity Lab incorporated that for law firms, called it the Mansfield rule. There's now sort of various different levels. We're on the 4th level of that. And what that does is it really holds us accountable to our making sure that we are interviewing, not just getting resumes from, but interviewing and considering a very diverse pool of candidates. And so one of the things that we do, and taking advantage of that with lateral recruiting, is we benchmark every month. I mean, all we're required to do is at the end of the year report in good faith that we have done well. We benchmark every single month to say, are we meeting our targets? Are we doing well? If we're not doing well with this population or in this specific area, why not? Why are we not getting these folks? And it keeps us, able to be nimble and to respond. And, if we're 2 months into the year and we see that we're not doing that well, we can adjust it throughout the year, as opposed to a look back on 12 months to say, wow, we didn't really do that well this year. We're going to have to do better next year. It gives us information in real time. And, the other step of that program is and it's part of what that program is, but it's also an internal step. If we decide, we have 2 candidates, one who's of a diverse background and one who isn't, and we decide to make an offer to the one who is not, they have to, that group, that partner, whomever is sponsoring that hire, has to make the case to the head of their department as to why they're not hiring the other one. And so there's not just sort of the decision making, there's a real analysis that goes into every single hire to ensure that we're actually, doing well and following those guidelines. And so that gives us, sort of this level of accountability that, frankly, if you look at our numbers, makes them really impressive among other law firms, just because we're sort of, we're forcing ourselves to stick to a certain standard and process, and all of our partners understand it and respect it. So I'm sure some other things may come up throughout the conversation, but that's sort of my high-level points.
Thank you. And, it goes without saying that, that's another area where, like, in terms of what we're communicating in written materials and stuff, that Molly also would have some collaboration, or her team would have collaboration with you behind the scenes as well. And, the Mansfield rule is another example of where there's cross-pollination, again, because there are components that talent touches and diversity touches, and the business development and pitch team touches as well. We have a question that came up, and I think it's related to what you were saying, Lindsay, about, when we're recruiting. And I'm going to expand this question to say, it doesn't just apply to recruiting, it applies to any communication about the firm. But the question was, do we acknowledge that the firm is not yet there and where it wants to be, or do we just focus on the current initiatives? And I'm going to let you guys chime in and put any finessing on this, but the answer is yes. The answer is it's a both and, is that we are honest about where we are, and we're honest about the fact that we haven't achieved our goals. Clearly, we haven't achieved our goals. We're having this webinar here talking about how we can cross-collaborate more to get to our goals. So we're not there. But we do talk about the things that we are currently doing, because people want to know. I mean, I've had people call me and say, the firm has given me an offer. Now I want to talk to you, diversity person, and I want to know what programs your firm has for people like me. And I started rattling off what we do for diversity. And in one case, the young woman said, no. I'm a Black woman, and I want to know specifically, because we are basically extinct in law firms. I want to know, what does the firm provide to help people like me succeed? And so you have to also talk about what you currently offer, because that's going to be part of the employee's life experience in the organization. So you have to talk about that. Would you add anything, any of you, to that answer?
Corey, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I also think it's important. I just want to reiterate the idea of being honest about where you are as an organization, because people, today's consumers are very avid consumers of information. They have very high, sort of very, very finely tuned BS meters. Can I say that?
Yes.
So to try to put some kind of spin on it, especially if it's a person that's going to start progressing through your pipeline to become a part of a firm, could really do damage to your brand. So it's much better to be authentic, honest, positive, forward-looking, and really start working on the programs that are going to get you the achievements that you can talk about later.
And the community talks to each other.
Mm-hmm.
They talk to each other. I can't remember, other than my first job out of law school, every other job that I've taken, I talked to other people about the reputation of the firm, and people who used to work there and people who currently worked there. So it doesn't make sense to say something that cannot be simply verified. And all it takes is somebody in the organization to say, that's not right, we don't do that. And then you really look bad. Kelly, let's talk engagement, retention, advancement, promotion, all of that stuff. So, gosh, there's so much we can talk about there, right? But one thing that at our firm that we really emphasize is the fact that inclusion and talent management and development are intertwined in a way that they can't be separated, right? So when we're talking about whether people feel a sense of inclusion or a sense of belonging, it's about their day-to-day experiences. It's about where we hired them, where we recruited, how we onboarded them, how we integrated them. Are they getting the right work? Are they being supportive? Who are they working with? Are they working with jerks, or are they working with inclusive leaders? So much of the work that we do is about those day-to-day experiences. And we could have an entire session, 2-hour session just on that. So we're only going to have to pick a few things to talk about for this webinar. But one thing that a lot of organizations try to figure out is the whole mentor-sponsor thing. Because we know people need to be mentored, and we know from a lot of the studies that a lot of racial minorities, for example, don't get enough mentoring. But we know that at the bottom line, they get more mentoring than they get sponsoring, and sponsoring is essential for success. So can you talk about ways in which inclusion and talent development, as well as firm leadership, have worked together to try to address this mentor-sponsor balance to help promote engagement and advancement of diverse talent?
Sure, thanks, Corey. I want to start by saying I think one of the most critical things, especially for folks on this call who have your own talent teams and professional development teams, you have to have a fabulous team in place. People that really want to support your attorneys, support your firm, understand the core values, are genuine and can make connections with your attorneys, your staff, everyone. Fortunately, at Cyfarth, we have that. You have to be flexible, and you have to use your voice. I'm going to talk a little bit about our specific sponsorship program that we started back in 2012, but it's evolved. And I think in terms of being flexible and using your voice, you need to be able to continue to identify gaps and challenges. This is continuing. This will always be a moving target. And when I say this, I mean just how do we retain talent? It's going to change year to year. It's going to change with each generation. It changed this year significantly. We had to shift and adjust. And so I think when you're looking at ways you can build IND into your culture from a talent perspective, really, some of it's almost simple. You just have to realize that, are there themes I'm hearing on a weekly basis? Are there offices where I'm identifying that seem to always have challenges with a particular group? Are there departments? And so those are things that I would definitely say are really critical to your talent teams when trying to identify, do we need a sponsorship program? Do we need an expanded sponsorship program? What is the right kind of initiative to approach if we're going to start something new? So at our firm, we have a lot of mentoring opportunities. And everyone who joins the firm receives an assigned mentor. There's always an opt-out process, which I think is really important. You need to give people the ability to contact someone that they trust, that they feel comfortable with, but they don't feel like they will get any backlash if they say, I'm just not connecting with this person. My mentor and it has nothing personal, I just don't feel comfortable going to this person. So we always have an opportunity where we say, if it's just not working, just tell us, and we will find a way on the back end without making it about you to make a change, so that you do have someone that you're feeling comfortable with and that you can work with, and that can help you navigate the firm. So everyone receives a mentor upon joining. We have a all associate coaching program. This goes hand in hand with what Corey was saying earlier about the Belonging Project coaching program. These are trained partners from our firm that took the time to get, certified, CIFAR certified as coaches. And so it's voluntary, and associates can select from a couple of partners and decide who they want to work with for a 6-month period. And we really, for those on the call who are not familiar with the difference between mentoring, coaching, and sponsorship, at CIFAR, we kind of divvy it up by mentoring is really exactly what you would think. It's giving you guidance. It's giving you some answers that you might need. It's answering your everyday questions, helping you navigate difficult situations. Coaching is really empowering the individual by asking, powerful questions, helping them find answers on their own, helping them develop an action plan for goals they want to set for themselves. And then on sponsorship, that's, in my mind, that's us giving power to our leadership to open the door for opportunities for those who are being sponsored that they might not otherwise have. And so our Triad program, which we started in 2012, is what we would really consider our sponsorship program. It started, again, we identified a gap. We were not successful in having a stronger pipeline of diverse associates that were making partnership. We weren't exactly sure why, so we started doing some outreach. We did small group interviews. We talked to people, and we decided we need to give them more opportunities to get in front of firm leadership. Because at a large firm, you might not meet the person ever in New York if you're sitting in LA, and that might not give you access to be on certain client teams, meet with people who are in leadership positions that are influencing the decisions of making partner. So our entire executive committee got on board, and they said they will all serve as sponsors. And so they are paired with, each year, we have a small group of high-performing senior associates that are 1 to 3 years out from partnership. And they're paired with a sponsor from our executive committee, and then another, what we call as a mentor, but it is someone who also is in a leadership role, whether an office managing partner, but can influence and drive opportunities for change. So we've built off that, the Triad program. We've continued to be able to increase our group of associates that go through. And because of that, we have made, we have a very good success rate, which you can read all about on our website, on how many of those individuals are now partners at this firm. A couple of them, 2 of them now, since 2012, have now made equity partner after being associates in this program. So it's a really, really cool program. All of our executive committee, the other thing is they're accountable. And so we have our co-heads, Gerald Pauling and Laura Mecklin, who really spearheaded this program initially. They will also call people out, our executive committee members, our sponsors, and say, you're not doing what we asked you to, so you might not be a sponsor next year. And our partners really take some ownership in that. They see it as kind of a competition on whose individuals can make partner first, and they've opened doors to our associates in different client teams, like I mentioned, introducing them to people that they might not otherwise have had the opportunity to. So I'll pause there, Corey. I think that hopefully covered your sponsorship question.
Yes, it does. And, I'm really proud of this particular sponsorship program. At my last organization, I launched a sponsorship program, and we had a bunch of changes after pilot. And what I love about this program is first of all, that Sci-Fi was doing this before it became a thing for law firms to do it. The other thing that I love that Kelly mentioned, but I can't reiterate enough, is just how important it is. When we talk about these inclusion drivers, we talk about leadership, we talk about communication, we talk about measurement and accountability, and we talk about education. And the sponsors come from the department chairs and the executive committee, the most powerful people in our organization. And every year since we've had this program, we've had 100% participation from that group, which is incredible. So it means these EC members now, since 2012, they've each had at least, 8 people they've sponsored. And like my managing partner, my boss will tell you, he still has relationships with all the people that were his sponsees. And I think that that's just, it's critically important. Kelly, there was one thing you didn't say that I think the audience may find very helpful, is that when we, I wasn't there yet, when we started this program, obviously diversity was the motivation behind it, but we made it inclusive. And at any given time, there's usually about 2/3 of this group that are diverse. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. Which
yeah,
I also love, because I think it's important that some of our non-diverse attorneys hear and have developed these relationships with some of our diverse, because they otherwise didn't know about some of the struggles or challenges that they were facing. So they've developed relationships and have had more candid communication with each other about over the last year that I think they would have not otherwise had.
Did you talk about the LDC advisor and how that plays a role? So one partnership that we did this year, because we've been trying to build things out collaboratively, is talking about how, as partners and leaders, we can be more inclusive in how we give feedback and evaluation. So Kelly and our office manager in Chicago reached out and said, we want to do this. And diversity and inclusion said, hey, we've been wanting to do that. The timing sucks, but let's do it. And so we did training that we asked every partner to attend, where we address unconscious bias and cultural competency blind spots and how they show up in evaluations, and how you can give feedback consistently throughout the year and do evaluations in a more inclusive way. But talent development also has this function that we call LDC, that I think is an important part of this conversation when you're talking about evaluations, work allocation, all of those processes that tend to be the key issues in retention of diverse talent. So can you explain what the LDC does? And for those of you who are listening, would you put in the question and answer what your version of that is in your organization and how it functions? Kelly?
Sure. So our LDC is, it stands for Lawyer Development Committee. I'm not going to give away the answer to everyone, but essentially those serve, each individual who joins the organization is paired with a partner that serves as a mentor. This is someone they should be meeting with quarterly. It's someone who, at the end of their annual performance cycle, looks through all of their performance evaluations that were completed, as well as their self-evaluation, and writes up an assessment. And really, that person is to be serving as their advocate when they're in the evaluation meeting. So that the partner in the meeting says, oh, Associate Kelly, had a fabulous year. She needs to work on her legal writing. She needs to do this and that, but otherwise she's everywhere we would expect for an associate at her level. And here's where I think they should be promoted to. And so that LDC advisor is really there as an advocate. They do the due diligence in advance of the meetings to talk to people who there might be challenges along the way in any working relationships, but they're really there to serve as that individual kind of support and mentor. Corey, I was going to quickly touch on the quarterly diverse calls, if you think that's okay.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yes, actually, yes, that's also an excellent collaboration. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think this is important. Something we started many years ago, probably 5 now, is we do quarterly diverse talent calls. And so our attorney talent team, the four of us meet with each department chair about their individual attorneys, and we go through income partners, anyone who's in our professional services group, which is comprised of senior counsel, staff attorneys, and then associates. And we basically walk through every diverse individual and say, here's where their hours are, here's where their performance is, here's what we're hearing, here's what their LDC advisor has noted, they're on track, they need improvement, whatever it might be. And really the point of this is, one, catch things before it gets too late, two, identify training needs, development, make sure people are, if they're laterals, that they're integrating well to the firm, that they have a friend. Lately, we've been asking more like, who is your person? Who do you go to? Which we think isn't really important. And then the best thing about these meetings is that, again, back to accountability, after they're all done, we roll this up to the chairman of the firm, and we have a full firm meeting with just him and our talent team and Corey. And we talk about each individual. And from there, our chairman will essentially say to us, well, what's your action plan? If you see that this person is struggling or their hours are low, what are you doing specifically, or what partner do I need to pick up the phone and call to make sure that this individual is successful or gets on additional, gets in a pipeline of work? Those have proven to be really, really, really important, especially going into the evaluation season. So there's no surprises, so that we can catch things in advance, so that we can get involved. If we're just nobody on the call has a clue what's going on with an individual, we recognize that's a problem, and we need to reach out and talk to this person and identify the right person to call that person as well. So I think that's something that doing these over the years have greatly impacted our ability to know, where our associates' heads are at and who they're actually working with, and it helps with the work allocation, because if we identify all they're doing is declaration campaigns and doc review, that's not working for them. That shouldn't be the work they're doing at this level. We need to plug them in with other partners and other work and assignments. So that's just something else I would recommend. I think that's been greatly powerful, and also putting accountability on our leadership to make sure they know that, these are the people in your group and you need to be paying attention to them.
Yeah. And these quarterly talent reviews that Kelly talks about, the initial meetings that happen with the talent team, the co-chairs of the inclusion and diversity team, and myself, we also go over hours, and we go over percentages and trends. So when the meetings happen with the department chairs, each department, they see how they're trending on their diversity. They see how they're trending. And part of the conversation also is, are you going up? Are you going down? And what's the reason? So those are also part of the conversations. And then at the evaluation period, we have this thing we call calibration. So everybody's going to get their review summarized by the LDC advisor, but then this group of LDC committee people will sit down, and per department and per office, they go through all their people to say, okay, well, who's moving up, who's staying at the same, and they discuss other things. But part of why they're doing this all together is to make sure, like in the bias interrupters work that we talk about, make sure that we're not treating one person differently, so that you have a group of people who are saying, wait a minute, we just did this over here. What are we doing over here? And that's also an important part of the process, because we've got this multi-layer review that inclusion and diversity also gets to have insight in and participate in. So we have 16 minutes left, and I'm sitting here realizing that this topic is so huge. We have like so much more to share, and Kelly didn't even share all the stuff, to be honest, and neither did Lindsay. So Molly, I'm going to go to you next. The Belonging Project. Laura and I are texting each other saying, this pandemic sucks. We're so worried about all the diverse people out there. Oh God, is it going to be like 2008 and 2009? And then one day she comes back and she says, well, I think we should do something. And I'm like, okay, let me go back and figure out what something could look like. And so I designed this thing that looks really nice on paper. I'm like, yeah, we could do this, we can do this. and we talk back and forth, and Gerald's like, well, I don't want to just be a sponsor. I want to be a mentor. Sponsorship takes too much time. We're like, okay, let's add a mentoring program. And then we come to you and we're like, Molly, we have this initiative that we want to do, and the pandemic is really going crazy, and we would like you to do this in a week. we want the website built, and we want all our information up, and we're like, we've pulled the resources. We have all the resources. We have the plan here. Build us a website. And I have to tell you, I forwarded you those emails. I got a lot of emails from a lot of people asking if this is something that we've been working on for a year and just decided to launch it during the pandemic. And I had to tell them, no, this was like in 2 weeks, 3 weeks of this is what we want to do and creating it. So tell me how your team works magic to make things appear out of thin air.
Well, in order to get to the point where we were at with you in helping you bring the Belonging Project to the marketplace, you actually have to go back a couple of years to when we kicked off our brand refresh project. And a lot of the people on this call were actually a part of that project. And if you're a DEI person on this call and you're aware that your firm is working on a brand or a new website, I encourage you to put yourself out there to be a part of that work. We had a very large working group that eventually encompassed about 90 people within the firm, but we made very, very sure when we were thinking about our new brand that we had inclusion and diversity at the forefront of what we were doing. So we had at the table in all of our earliest brand discussions, we had Laura Mecklin, we had Gerald Pauling, we had Nick Waddles, who is now a member of our executive committee. Like I said, when I made a beeline for Corey's office, last July, we were on the verge of launching our brand, and I wanted her to see it because I wanted to get her take on it. I wanted to see how close we were. And she had some very valuable feedback. So if you're in a position at a firm where you can actually help the firm with its brand story, with its brand positioning, with its brand relaunch, that's a very, very good time to have inclusion and diversity at the table. So from there, we built the website, and we built the website with a great deal of flexibility in mind. So because of this, we were able to take something that was quite large in scope and spin it up into a microsite rather quickly. My whole team is very invested in what our inclusion and diversity team is doing. They're very invested in what's going on in the world. And we really sort of I talk about the work we do as a service pyramid. Law firms put out a lot of marketing. They do a lot of work. There's individual marketing. There's practice group marketing. We as a marketing team have to have certain sort of templates, platform pieces in place so that we can get all of that stuff out to the marketplace in a timely way. But at the top of the pyramid are the really bespoke strategic pieces that help differentiate the firm. And I would say inclusion and diversity is one of those things. So inclusion is something that I have touched and been a part of from, 2 or 3 jobs ago, and been in big law for, going on 20 years now. I can't believe that. So it's always something that I've been involved in, and that kind of involvement makes it much easier to work with the concepts, to get things done a lot more quickly. There's always going to be review. There always has to be somebody sort of looking at what we produce to make sure it's correct. But my mindset is always one of learning from Corey, from the marketplace, from what's going on in the world, so that we can get to that first draft much, much quicker than if we were continually having to ramp up. That's why inclusion is at the top of my own personal service pyramid. And that's why I work with Corey hand in hand.
I love it. Okay. So your team, we're working on the Belonging Project, and we put together the verbiage. We're like, this is the description, and this is what the programs will do. And then you say, don't write like a lawyer, let's change this? Or like how do you make us look good? What's the stuff that you do?
That's really, I put that up to the brand. Our brand values are, they're right on our website, but the more important aspect of the brand is the brand voice and tone. And that's where you get to things like writing and visuals. And our brand attributes are welcoming, pragmatic, and energized. So everything that we write and we put out in the world, and I would say that putting those things together really gets to the heart of inclusion. You're being welcoming, you're pulling out people's best skills, you're getting people excited, energized, and engaged. And that's one of the things that we try to do with our writing. And so that's why I encourage people not to write like a lawyer. Because it can be off-putting. And those attributes were very much a part of our brand process of building our new brand platform and our new brand story.
And so all of these things Molly's talking about, you'll see reflected on the website. We're fully transparent on what our strategic approach is. Some people use strategic plans. We use a strategic approach because we're lean and mean and we're Sci-Farth. Also because I like strategic approaches and I don't like plans. Our action plan is visible and we're very transparent with all of that stuff. And so it's on there. In our annual report, there's a section on what we're doing in inclusion and diversity. There's another team we work closely with on business development, pitches, proposals, where we integrate what we're doing as a firm from an inclusion and diversity space into what they communicate. I sometimes go with our attorneys to pitches, especially when the client says, we want to hear what's going on in inclusion and diversity, and they say, we want her there. I have meetings, I've had meetings, and I have upcoming meetings where I have to meet with a client to discuss. So we try to integrate inclusion and diversity as much as possible. And Sin, who's behind the scenes, didn't want to be on camera today, also does a lot of the client interfacing. But this is external facing. Let's talk internal facing, because communication, and of course in the comments, if you guys want to comment, or in the question and answer, tell us what's different at your firm. Who does some of these things we're talking about? What role does I&D play with pitches and calibrations, if you have them, evaluation? I really want to know, what are you guys doing in your organizations from an I&D perspective when it comes to evaluations and feedback and recruiting? So real quick, this year has shifted what effective leadership looks like, right? We're all under stress. We're all experiencing anxiety. If you are someone who experiences or lives with depression, I say I thrive with depression because I refuse to say that it's going to take me out or that I'm a victim. But the reality is we're going through a year where all of those pressures are even more stressful, and the need for leaders to communicate well has become even more important. For us to communicate frequently, for us to be transparent, for us to be empathetic. Can you talk a little bit about the role of communications and diversity and a mindset of well-being, and how that has played internally, at least in our organization, in terms of supporting the organization internally?
Right. Yeah. Internal communications has been so important this last year with everybody being separated. And also, Corey, as you mentioned, everybody being anxious, with what's going on with COVID, with George Floyd, and all the trauma that people have experienced and re-experienced through those events. And this is a year for visible, transparent, sort of authentic or vulnerable leadership. And this isn't necessarily something that is natural to people, and maybe especially not natural to the people who ascend to the leadership of a law firm. We are lucky to be blessed with a very humble, empathetic firm chair who has really come on board with the idea of being more visible and sharing more with the firm on a more frequent basis. Right now, his communications are once a week to the entire firm, once a week to the partners only. And, I have been sort of helping him keep his eyes and ears on what needs to be talked about. And it was interesting, this is a time when marketers need to, or not marketers, communicators really need to stay connected to what's going on in the world. When George Floyd died, I can remember being so horrified by what I saw, but it took me a day, I'm being very honest here, to actually connect it to what needed to be done within the firm. And I think a lot of people may have had that experience, even folks whose role is around inclusion and diversity, that something like that is so traumatic, yet we have to go back and think about the people that we work with, the type of leader we want to have. And Corey and I very, very quickly came together and came up with a strategy for our firm chair in terms of internal and external communication. And Corey was just so brilliant. I can't imagine having gone through this experience without you, Corey. Just so brilliant in coaching us. So brilliant in coaching us in completely uncharted territory, where, leadership wants to be considered agnostic in some way. But we are living in a time when that's no longer an option, and getting people that we work with at all levels to understand and see the role that what we say plays in helping us build community, helping people understand what the firm's values are, what the firm finds important, and what's worth talking about. So, Corey, I'm so glad you've been with us. And, it's just been a very positive learning experience. Was there something else you wanted me to say there, Corey?
No, I just wanted you to talk about how important it is and just how, there was working behind the scenes to say, are we being empathetic enough? Are we communicating to people that they're important? Yes, we care about billable hours, but are we encouraging our leaders to make sure they're checking on people? So those were things that we also did. I'll write something and send it to you. How does this read? And I'll send it to the partner saying, here's some things that we absolutely have to do to connect, because we need connection more than ever now. And without the connection, we don't have belonging. If we don't have the belonging, we don't have the productivity. Neither do we have the organization we want to have at the end of this. So yes, we're going through a crisis, but we have to lead as if we're building the organization for next year or whenever this pandemic is over. And all of a sudden, I think we were all wearing different hats, right?
Right.
Because, one of the things that also was happening is, I'm sending tips to leaders about how to be inclusive in these times and how to be empathetic and well-being things to think about. And then Cypress Life is, creating resources. And we haven't even talked about Cypress Life to send out to also support people with resources. So it's very, very collaborative. And one of the things you haven't heard yet, we've all been centering this in collaboration with IND, but the truth is, talent and recruiting are collaborating, recruiting and marketing are collaborating, pro bono and talent are collaborating, because when people come into our organization anymore, they want to know what's the footprint for social and corporate responsibility, and what are my pro bono opportunities? Pro bono, starting with Gen X and even more so with millennials and younger, they're asking about that in interviews. They want something meaningful to do. So here's what we're going to do, because I clearly should have made this a 90-minute call because there's so much to unpack and I didn't. And I want to be respectful of everybody's time. If you have to leave at 3, that's fine, because if you registered, you'll get an email providing the recording. if it's okay with my speakers, can you guys stay an extra 15 minutes?
Yes, and you should probably give the CLE code before people drop off.
Oh, yes. Oh, before. The CLE code is S as in Sam, 1413. SS, like Saifa Shaw, 1413. You're going to need that code when you send in your form for CLE. So if this is okay, Molly, I'll round up with you. I'll talk to Allegra, and depending on where we're on time, Kelly, I'll come back and talk about wellness. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So Molly, another thing that a lot of organizations participate in are these heritage months.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are fans of them, some of us are not. I personally am not a fan of them if that's all you're doing for your inclusion and diversity program, but they serve a very important purpose. What role does your team play? And then I'm going to ask Allegra to pick from there on her component. What role does your team play when it comes to things like Heritage Month or significant things, or Ruth Bader Ginsburg died?
This definitely falls into that, the tip of the service pyramid, where we work directly with folks to help them get their message out. Because our brand is so fresh, it's only a year old. We're very, very protective of what we have built, and we want to make sure that what we're sending out, even internally, is complies with our brand, but also tells the story that our affinity groups, for example, want to tell internally, and really helping them shape sort of their communication approach, their strategy, how they're going to send things out internally, and putting it all in a package that's appealing and on brand and with the reader in mind. That's one of the roles of my marketing department, is to always have the reader in mind. Before we pass it on to Allegra, I did want to bring one other thing up as it relates to inclusion. Is as part of our brand relaunch and our website refresh, is we did a full ADA accessibility review of the website, and we have a little way to go, but it was built from the ground up with the WCAG principles in mind, and that's a very important constituency for us to make sure that people, regardless of their abilities, no matter what their abilities are, can access the content on our website, because we know that's an important destination for people.
Thank you. That's very important. Very important. So Allegra, pro bono philanthropy, community service, community engagement, that's a big part of your wheelhouse.
It is, and actually I want to just pick up on right where Molly left off on our brand refresh, because this is a takeaway that you all can do at your firms. That's so simple, and yet it's, I think, very powerful from a messaging standpoint about collaboration. So after the brand refresh, we have our brand, all the major departments in the firm got email templates. So like a banner for your email that you're going to send out. Office of the Chair has a banner. Office of Inclusion and Diversity has a banner. Office of the General Counsel has a banner. And we all got to sort of pick our color scheme and pick a little bit, but as Molly said, the brand is very well defined. And when those came out, my first stop, Corey knows this because this was when our offices were near each other. I went to her and I said, I have all these ideas for cross collaboration. What would you think if we asked the marketing department to create a co-branded banner template? And they did. And so Molly, thank you for your department for putting that together and being so receptive to it. But the idea is that when there is a cross collaboration between our groups, whether it is community service, and I can give a bunch of examples, but community service or pro bono or what have you, the very email that goes out, whether it's from me, from Corey, whoever, is co-branded pro bono and philanthropy over here and inclusion and diversity over here. And so before anybody even reads the content, they're understanding that this is a collaboration between our groups. And so I think that's something very easy for people to take away. If you're, charitable or pro bono people have a logo, you have a logo, or like a template, that's just a really, really easy way to send a message about collaboration.
Yes. That's a great example, actually. And Kelly's done that too for our Triad program. She worked with Cheryl on Molly's team, and they also did a branding thing on talent and inclusion and diversity. So it's cool when you have a department that's central, because they're talking to everyone and they can make sure that we're all being cohesive, which has happened because I have used a template and received a note that this is the wrong template. Well, that was very helpful. It was Cheryl. She was like, yeah, don't use this one. And to make it easy for you, I've just moved your content over here on the correct one. And that was nice. Pro bono. A lot of pro bono overlaps with diversity and inclusion, whether it's because of the communities we serve or it's because of the kind of issues. And we're seeing it even more clearly now where social justice issues have entered the workplace, because we're now seeing that these things we used to say were separate from diversity are actually integrated. What role does your team play in bringing those two things together as we engage in pro bono?
Sure. So we're looking at, particularly this year, obviously we're focused on racial equity and racial justice issues. And what we've really tried to do, and I've talked to Corey about this quite a bit, is there is an entity that maybe you guys are familiar with called the Law Firm Anti-Racism Alliance that has recently formed. And Corey has a leadership role in it. One of our executive committee members, Laura Macklin, has a leadership role in it. And it brings together law firm diversity, pro bono, and leadership to talk about what law firms in particular can do to address systemic racism. And that effort is getting underway. It's going to be a years-long effort. I mean, we're talking about looking at dismantling whole systems, whether that's housing or healthcare or the courts, that systemically have a negative effect on people of color. That initiative is going to take a long time and a lot of manpower. And while everybody is super excited about it right now, one of the things that we've talked a lot about, and I've talked to Corey about this, is that we have to also remember that our everyday pro bono work that we do, a lot of it is addressing what happens when people of color come into contact with a racist system. Again, whether it's healthcare, housing, or the courts, we know that people of color are disproportionately evicted from their homes. And that is an outcome of a racist system. And anytime we represent one of those individuals, it's a very small thing in the grand scheme, but we are addressing the outcome of this person's experience with a racist system. So we're really working in parallel. We're continuing our everyday work. We're not losing sight of kind of the shiny, we're not going after the shiny object and losing sight of our everyday work, but we see them as parallel. And so we're really working on that as a focus of pro bono, but without losing the everyday poverty law that pro bono addresses.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we do at Sci-Farth as part of these heritage months or special days actually is an area where some of our affinity groups actually directly work and collaborate with pro bono to do service projects or pro bono projects or community engagement activities. Can you speak to some of that?
Yes, and much like Molly, I pretty much accosted Corey on her first day. I was so happy that she was joining the firm because I had all these ideas of ways that our affinity groups could work with my department, which sounds very grandiose. It's a department of two. There's me and one other person, but I had all these ideas. Right, but there was a real void in terms of, we had an inclusion and diversity manager, but it's much different having somebody in the C-suite. And so I immediately wanted to talk to Corey about working with our affinity groups and really empowering them to put out into the firm and to promote what they felt were important initiatives. So for example, just to kind of go through a range of them, our A+ affinity group, that's our African American affinity group, they have embraced MLK Day of Service in January. And the head of the A+ group sends out an all-firm email. It's my department's job to find the volunteer opportunities in each of our markets, and then to empower the affinity group leader to say, on behalf of our group, here is a great opportunity that we would like to promote to you. So that's an example. Then another example would be we participate in the Girl Up Global 5K, which benefits Girl Up, which is a youth girl empowerment program of the United Nations Foundation. And we do that. It's sponsored annually and promoted annually by our Cypress Women's Network. And we get a lot of traction out of that. And the Women's Network assigns captains to each city, and it's very much their initiative. And then on the pro bono side, those two are both community service, but on the pro bono side, we had an immigration agency approach us and say, there's a huge backlog of LGBT asylum cases. Would you guys be interested in taking them? And so I went to the head of the LGBT affinity group and said, do you want to package this as, being sponsored by and promoted by the LGBT group? Open to everyone, of course, obviously, but it's coming from them as a place of saying, this is a population that we feel strongly about and we would like you to help. And so we did a training, we did multiple LGBT asylum claims out of that. And then the final example I'll give is just our All Abilities group came to me and said, we would like to also promote some kind of pro bono opportunity. What do you think would be good for us? So sometimes it originates with me going to the group. Sometimes it originates with the group coming to me for ideas. And for that one, we promoted adult guardianship cases for people with disabilities to have appropriate guardians appointed for them. And we did dozens of those cases, and through the promotion of the affinity group, we did more than we've ever done before. That was not a big area of law for us, and it became one. In 1 year, I think we did 20 of those cases. So I just think there's so much opportunity for the cross collaboration. I think it's important to keep each other top of mind. And it's not just I&D and pro bono, like Corey said, but I work with Kelly's team all the time, and Molly and Lindsay too. I mean, there's just so much opportunity to collaborate. One thing we didn't mention that's another quick practical takeaway is many of the people on this call, and maybe a few others, we have a quarterly collaboration call. The whole point of it is to tell each other what we're working on and to spark ideas with each other and to say, like, oh, I didn't know you were going to do that. And there's also a communications aspect to it. I don't want to be sending out all firm emails on the same day that, benefits enrollment opens, just to give an example. From earlier this week, it's pro bono week this week, but we coordinate. I mean, that's really the whole point of it. It's just to tell each other, this is what I'm planning to send out. These are my quarterly initiatives that we're doing, and hear from each other.
And also to collaborate together, to strategize together, to say, like at the beginning of this year, I did the rounds. I, shared with Lindsay and with Kelly and with the other chiefs, like, this is the strategy of what we're trying to do. This is the action plan. Nobody knew that in March everything was going to change. But anyhow, this is our strategy. This is our plan. And same with Molly when we were working on our communication strategy, on how we want to communicate more intentionally internally. Because then as you're doing those things, you can go, oh, wait a minute, this overlaps with that. Or you learn about other firm efforts and you're like, why am I recreating the wheel? Let's join up here. Lindsay, one thing as Allegra was talking that I thought about, if you can spend a minute and talk about some of the pipeline things that are they're a blend of internship, but also a blend of community service in the sense that, these are college kids or high school kids that we're not going to hire. at least right now.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, there's, the traditional pipeline programs of hiring 1Ls, which a lot of firms do. We make sure that we do all of those through diversity bar associations or in some cases, and this is increasing a little bit, which is a great thing, through client partnerships. And so we have 2 programs currently where one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, where working with one of our clients on each coast, 2 different clients, we hire 1Ls and they split their time between us and the client, and there's sort of more of a longer term career path between splitting those as well. So it gives them the opportunity to come in and work for a law firm through a client relationship, also work for the client for a little bit to sort of understand how the in-house counsel thinks before, coming back to the law firm and applying that. And so the client partnerships are a great thing, and they're not new, but they're starting to increase a little bit. But going beyond that, or sort of deeper or earlier, we have some collaborations, and they, various shapes and forms with historically Black colleges and universities, and other local diversity initiatives or groups where we have people that either they come in and they do mentoring, they do shadowing, they intern with us, and so we go back as far as high school in some offices and some programs where we just have folks come in. Cristo Ray is a high school example that's nationwide, but they come in and they work at the firm, and they're not doing lawyer work. They're doing whether they're in document services, or maybe they're working in the mailroom or the file room or conflicts or billing as an intern, but they come in and they're getting exposed to what the law firm environment is. And so maybe they go to law school, maybe they do legal recruiting for the rest of their lives, or talent development or something, but exposing them to sort of the law firm environment and giving that to them as an option to think of. And so we don't know exactly how all of those pan out, but just sort of reaching further back earlier on in people's careers and exposing them to the legal world, we think just generally helps the legal industry in terms of increasing diversity.
Perfect. Well, we have extended our time by 15 minutes, and we are now 2 minutes over the 15-minute extension. I want to thank you all very, very much for doing this. We honestly just tipped the iceberg. There is so much more. Something that I would recommend is like joint strategic planning sessions. And last year, Kelly and Lindsay organized one with this was when we could be in person, all of the talent team and all of the legal recruiting team. And at the time, the diversity team was just one person. But those are things that can be done. Molly and I have spent 2-3 hour strategic sessions on all the things that intersect in areas that I need help. Pro bono, me, you, and Kimberly have sat in a conference room for 2 hours just mapping out stuff. So we definitely encourage that. Kelly, I think that we're going to have to come back and talk about inclusion and well-being and wellness. And if there's interest, to just talk retention. But definitely the wellness. I'm really bummed that we didn't get to talk about it. So we will have to come back and talk about that at another time. Thank you for your patience, for all of you who stayed over. We really appreciate it. You will get the full video. And those who missed it earlier, the video, CLE code SS as in Sci-Fi Shaw 1413. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.